Welcome to City Church's On Demand Messages. My name is Josh, and we're so glad you're tuning in whenever and wherever you're tuning in from. In fact, if it's your first time, we'd love to connect with you. You can text new to the number on the screen right now. We've got a free gift for you. Also, if you need prayer, we would love to pray with you. We believe that prayer is not our last resort, but it is our first response to what is going on in our lives and the lives of those around us. And so we'd love to join in with you. And so you can text next to the number on the screen. Also, if you'd like to invest financially into the mission of City Church to be a Jesus movement that awakens the soul in the city, you can text next as well to the number on the screen. We believe every Sunday morning when we gather in person and online, and we open up God's Word, that He has something special and specific for every one of us. And so as we lean into this week's message that you're about to watch, we pray that God opens up your heart to whatever He has for you, and we hope that you are encouraged by today's message. Again, if we can do anything for you, please let us know. It's kind of Move Up Sunday in 2 weeks, and so sixth or fifth graders, which is the next milestone, fifth grade into sixth grade, will be in here with us. So my daughter's kind of coming in here with us, and so my wife had to have a conversation of like, hey, you can't share some of the stories anymore. I'm like, oh, watch. But so that's another one though, fifth to sixth grade, where middle school is that awkward season of life where you're just trying to figure out who you are. I remember for me, I was in seventh grade, I was this height, I was 6'5", I was about 75 pounds lighter, and I had a size 15 shoe, and so you just trip over yourself a lot. It's a clumsy stage in life. Anybody have a clumsy stage in life? No, just me. Okay, thanks, guys, liars. So you go from that to high school, and again, you go from middle school to high school. If it's public school, you're the little fish in a big pond again, and then you graduate high school, and so we're honoring graduates today, and so you go from high school to college or to a trade or whatever else you've got going on. And then you transition from that to college, and maybe you graduate college, maybe you get your first full-time job, and then you go from there, maybe you get married, this is not an order, I'm just saying, like you get married, and so that's like you thought you were like a humble person, and you get married, and you're like, oh, I'm a really selfish person. And then you have kids, and then it's like, oh, I'm a really selfish person. So then you have kids, and you have that next milestone in life, and then your kids get a little bit older, and then all of a sudden you move from mom to grandma, or my parent, or my kid's case, from mom to moo-moo, which made sense to go from my dad to go from dad to poo-poo. But he's just Pops. He's sitting back there, and I'll hear about that later. There it is, Pops. He's in the house. Pops is in the house, everyone. So you move from that to grandparents, and then maybe you move to retirement, and you run around with in your underwear all day. I don't know what retired people do, but maybe that's what you do there. And then you go from there, and then you have the last milestone. You breathe your last breath, right? Welcome to church. Happy Sunday. Now, some of us are at different stages in that, and some of us, we feel like we have a lot of milestones ahead, which we don't know if those are certain. Others of us, we feel like we've got a few milestones left, right? Which begs this question. At the end of our life, when we look back, I don't know about you, but I want to live a life that mattered. I want to know that I live a life that mattered. I want to know that I lived a life that made an impact and influenced something or someone. Like, that's my goal. I think if we went through and had a conversation with every single one of us in this room, we would all agree that at the end of our life, we want to look back and we want to know that we lived a life that made a difference, that had an impact. So the question is, if we want to look back on our life and see that we made a difference, the question we have to ask ourselves is, are we currently making a difference in our life now? Now, some of us would define that in different ways. Some of us, it would be, I'm trying to, build up a certain amount of wealth, like a retirement or whatever else. Some of us, I want to give my kids a better life than I had, and so I want to build this up. I want to give them a college fund. Whatever that is, a lot of us attribute wealth and things to living a life that makes a difference. But just for a moment, can we just wipe those off the table? Can we level the playing field? And let's talk about your experiences, your failures, your successes, your joys, your losses. What are you going to do with that? What do you do with those things? I would argue that those are more valuable than anything that you ever find in your bank account. And the sad thing is that if we don't figure out what to do with the wisdom that we've gained over the years, when we die, that wisdom dies with us. And I think if we're truly asking the question, who's next, then our number one focus should be, how can I leverage the life experiences that God has given me to invest in the next generation? Which is why it brings us to this story of Timothy. We're going to be in 2 Timothy this morning, chapter 2. I think we have to ask this question: what would it look like to leverage who you are for the sake of someone else? Because I believe the value of a life is always determined by how much of it was given away. The value of your life is determined by how much of it you gave away in the end of the day. So we're looking at this story this morning, and it's a story between Paul and Timothy and what he kind of calls him to do. I just want to say this: if you're not a follower of Jesus in this room, then I think today is going to help you. I think today is going to help you. I think you'll get some tips and some life hacks and probably make you a better person. But if you are a follower of Jesus in this room, I believe that today isn't just talking about an opportunity we have. I believe it's talking about a responsibility that we have. And so if you're here and you don't know Jesus, I just want you to know my agenda, that you can get all the life hacks you want to invest in the next generation, but you will not experience a life that truly matters until you have had not a life hack, but a life transformation and a life change. And so I just want you to know my agenda. My agenda is for us to see that Jesus is the beginning to us understanding how to live a life that matters. Like, that's who it is, and that's who he is. And Paul actually defends that and shows us that in a second. So let's just jump right in. So 2 Timothy chapter 2, verse 1. It says this: you then, so we'll stop there. That's like a therefore. So he's connecting two thoughts. So what Paul has just told Timothy, he's writing to Timothy as a spiritual parent. Paul is at the end of his life, and so he's about to experience that last milestone, and so he's writing these words of wisdom to Timothy. So Paul has just told Timothy in chapter 1 that number one, that he's suffering. So Paul tells Timothy, if you're going to follow Jesus, you're going to suffer. Like, you just need to know that the other thing he's saying is also all of Asia, who I thought were for me, has actually turned their back on me. So all the people I thought were my friends have turned their back on me. So Paul's really trying to encourage Timothy, saying, hey, you're going to suffer. So because of that, you then, my child, again, Paul is not a physical parent, he's a spiritual parent. Be strengthened by the grace that is in Christ Jesus. So Paul says be strengthened. That just means be strong, become strong. But here's the interesting thing about Paul. All of what Paul did was always strengthened and seasoned by the grace. It was always filtered by the grace of Jesus. So everything Paul experienced was always filtered by the grace of Jesus. Grace is unmerited favor. It's not something that we earn. It's something that we are freely given, which tells us if it was freely given and we can't earn it, then we also can't do anything to lose it. So the one thing that we all have or we all have access to is the grace of God. That's what Paul's saying. So be strengthened not by your good looks, not by your youth, not by your charisma, not by your knowledge, not even by your faith. Be strengthened by the grace of Jesus. This is fundamental for us today. Because if we don't get that, then you're going to invest in people and just teach them good life lessons instead of gospel lessons, instead of life lessons that will actually lead them to Jesus. First, we have to start with filtering everything and allowing the grace of Jesus to define and shape everything. So that's what Paul's saying. I mean, this was Paul's argument in everything. He said, when I'm weak, then I'm strong. So my weaknesses, I'll display them and I'll shout them to the rooftops because it's the grace of God that is sufficient for me. Because his grace is made perfect in my weakness. So that's what Paul's starting with. Hey, this is how you become strong, by being rooted in the grace of Jesus. And then he says, and what you have heard from me, so what I've shared with you over the years in the presence of many witnesses, entrust to faithful men who will be able to teach others also. So what Paul's saying is he's linking naturally with Timothy's being empowered in grace, enabling him to transmit the precious deposit of things which he heard and experienced through the gospel. So Paul's saying, hey, I've given you this gospel message, and you've understood it through the grace of Jesus. And what we have to understand is we cannot pass on something that we don't possess. So Paul's saying we start with grace. And I want you to take that gospel, I want you to take everything that I've shared with you, all the wisdom that I've shared with you, and I want you to pass it on to men who will pass it on to other men. But first, it has to start with us because we can't pass on something that we don't possess. Like, you can't give someone and show someone the grace of Jesus if you first haven't experienced it. That's where we start. So we say, hey, what you've experienced through me and with me, I want you to pass this along to someone else. I love this because this is 4 generations of people. Paul, Timothy, faithful men, and then the next generation to other men. Like, I love that. And so he says, there's a couple words that kind of stick out to me. The first one is entrust. So this is a command and it's an imperative, like of immediate attention. Like, there is an urgency to this word. The original text literally means urgency. So there's an urgency for you to do this, Paul, and we'll get to this in a second. But, like, there's no waiting around. There's no, like, I got to find the right person, like my soulmate that I'm going to invest in or whatever else. And he's like, no, there's an urgency. You just need to do this. But who does he say find? He says find faithful men. So this word entrust actually means, in the original context, when someone in that day would hear it, they wouldn't think church, they wouldn't think the church service, they would actually think the dinner table. That word entrust literally means to set the table and invite people to it. So that's what he's saying. But he says this, who do we look for? Paul, who do you need to look for? Faithful men, which faithful just means trustworthy. So not charismatic, not the best looking, not the most like you. Faithful men. I think so many times when we think about, okay, who should I invest in? Who should I share my story with? Who should I spend time with? We usually look for people that look like us, like the things that we like, and are the same like age range as we are. So we're looking for someone who likes the same music as I do, or I need to find someone in the same like trade as I am, like same workforce that I'm in. I need to find someone the same age as I am. I need to find someone with the same skin color as I have. I need to find someone that likes the same kind of, like sports or whatever else. So we usually think that mindset because like usually attracts like. So I like to hang out with people who like the same things I like. And what Paul says is wipe all that off the table. There's an urgency to this. And what's the one thing you need to look for? Are they faithful? So what this tells me is there's someone right in front of you right now that's just waiting for you to invest in them. And you're looking over them because you're looking for somebody else. But they're the person that keeps showing up. They're the person that keeps serving. They're the person that keeps texting, that keeps encouraging you. All these things, you're like, man, but I wish I could just I need to find someone to invest in, and they're right in front of you. I'm saying there's an urgency to this. The gospel's got to spread. This thing's got to move. This thing's got to grow. This thing's got to multiply. So with that being said, don't look for someone who looks like you. Just entrust it to faithful men. That was the one characteristic. And one thing that I've learned in this is this, and I love that he kind of clarifies a lot of these things, but I think sometimes there's this pressure when we talk about, okay, who's next? Who do I invest in? Sometimes there's this pressure to find, to serve everyone or to invest in everyone. Like for me to stand on stage and be like, I have to invest in all of you. That's impossible. Literally, that's impossible. And we carry on this weight of I got to find 10 people, and I got to invest in all these people. Here's what I've learned. It's been incredibly freeing for me, and I think it's what we see here as well. That you and I, we are called to serve and love everyone. Everyone. No matter what they believe, no matter the colors, any of that, right? Their past, what they've done to us, we are called to serve and love everyone. But you can only invest in a few. You can only do this, what we're talking about, with a few. And it becomes overwhelming, but I would just say, instead of just a few, just start with one. Do for one what you wish you could do for everyone. So that's what he's saying. And then he goes on and he says, okay, so entrust the faithful men. So that's one tier. And then those faithful men will be able to teach others also. That word teach does not mean simply the impartation of facts, but instruction given in such a way as to shape the will of those being taught. So it's this molding process. This teaching and this information is being shared to mold the person. This comes down to it. The person that wants truly to invest in the next generation says this: it makes me happier for you to have my time, my energy, my attention, and my initiative than for me to keep them to myself. That's what Paul's getting at. So he's basically saying, Timothy, would you take the time to prepare the table, to set the table in such a way, and then once it's set, would you invite someone to the table? So this is Edozie. What's up? Edozie and I have sat around many tables. Yeah. Usually tables with tacos on them, yes, of all things. But here's what I know. Let's just go back. Oh, you know what? It's a rookie mistake. I moved this first service. Sorry. But you're way more important than first. I'm just kidding. Don't tell them I said that. No. Here's how I know that this usually doesn't go down. And if it does go down this way in your house, let's talk afterwards, okay? But normally you invite someone to the table. Put your napkin in your lap, bro. Or you can put it here if you like, whatever you feel comfortable with, Yeah. So here's what I feel like it doesn't. So you invite someone over to your house, right? And you invite them to your table. And then you just start to eat. What, you didn't bring your own food? It's BYOB, man. Bring your own bread. Y'all better chill with that. You didn't bring your own food? No. Usually when I invite someone over to my house, to my table, they're expected to bring their own food. If you've ever done that before, let's talk afterwards. Some simple manners that we might need to work through. And also, this bread is dry. I thought it was going to be less dry the second service. It's dry. Okay. That's not the way it works, does it? You invite someone to your house, you invite them to the table, and you say, hey, listen, like I've prepared a meal for you, man, and I would love to share it with you. It's just an appetizer. We're just going to start with bread. We got a 4-course meal in the back, but I've prepared something, and I would love to share what I have with you. This is what happens at our table. Timothy's saying, Paul's saying, this is what should happen in our lives. This is discipleship. This is us saying, I've got something, God's done something in my life. The grace of Jesus has covered all this. It's formed it, it's shaped it, it's molded it. And so now I want to invite you to the table, and if it helps, I'd love to share with you a part of my life. I mean, that's what we are talking about. This is what it means to invite someone to the table. This is what it means to invite in the next generation to your table, to ask who's next, to actually invest in them. It's basically saying, God, what have you entrusted to me? And I prepared it. It's here at the table, and now I want to invite someone else to the table and invite them into that and share. If it helps you, I'm willing to share. Thanks, man. Appreciate it. Here's the question. What would it look like to leverage who you are for the sake of someone else? This is how the gospel spreads. This is how mature we grow as Christians. This is how transformation happens. What would it look like to leverage who you are, the sum total of everything that you've experienced in your life and how Jesus has transformed it? What would it like for you to leverage who you are for the sake of someone else? Because the value of a life is always determined by how much of it was given away. For some of you, someone did this for you. They invited you to the table, and you're so thankful for that. For others of you, you wish someone would have done this for you. You wish someone would have taken the time, invited you to the table, and invested in you. And let's just be clear, sometimes it's a physical table that we're inviting them to. Other times it's at work, or it's over coffee, or it's working out, or whatever that is. It's simply this idea of inviting people into your life to share with them what you have. But I know the pushback. I've messed up too much. Like I've messed up way too much. Like you don't know my story. You don't know what I've done. You don't know my failures. And I would say this. It's actually your failures that make you the best candidate for this. Because we all know that we learn more from failure than we do success. Right? I mean, come on. That's what Paul says. Paul says, when I'm weak, then I'm strong. Like when I don't have it all together, the grace of God is sufficient for me. That's what Paul does. We learn the most from our failures. So my first, I always want to say it was a couple years ago. It's not. It was 15 years ago. My first ever internship in student ministry, I was 21. So I was in this internship. In the summer of that first internship, I took 2 ninth graders to go see the movie Wedding Crashers. And all of you laughing have seen that. Shame on you. So I'm watching Wedding Crashers, right? This isn't like the TBS version, okay? This is like in the movie theater. Well, if you haven't seen it, thank you. Thanks for saying that. Someone else said it, not me. Okay, so you pass by it. Blow it. It's fine. Not missing much. It's a rough movie. It's a rough movie. Language, content, sexual content, all that. It's a rough movie. So I'm sitting there with 2 13-year-old boys eating popcorn, thinking to myself, surely this is going to get better. Surely Will Ferrell will redeem this, which he never redeems anything. God love him. So I'm thinking, like, surely this is going to get better, and it never did. So that summer, I had to sit with both of their parents, and I had to write out everything that they heard and saw and tell that to their parents. Now, I was in student ministry for 12 years, and we trained over 100 volunteers. And every time we got to the movie section, guess what story I told? Hey, listen, when I was an intern, I took kids to go see Wedding Crashers. I love you, and I want you to be the best volunteer and set you up the best possible way to lead students to Jesus. So I made a stupid mistake. Would you please learn from my mistake? Every time. Every person. There's some of them in this room right now, and you can ask them afterwards. Every person. Don't make the same mistake I did. So can I push a little bit? If you're in this room and you've got some failures and some hardships, which, let's be honest, all of us do, and you've allowed the grace of Jesus to filter and shape and mold all those things, if you're in this room and you've been through a divorce or just had a really rough marriage, would it not be beneficial for you to invite a young married couple to your table? and say, hey, listen, I'm not comfortable getting on stage and sharing this with the whole world, but if it helps you, I'd love to share this. This is what happened in my life. This is what went wrong. Here's the mistakes I made. Here's the mistakes that were made, because I don't want that for you. Would it not be beneficial for you to invite them to your table and invest in them and share that with them? If you've had family conflict, so you've been at odds with your dad for 20 years, would it not be beneficial to invite a young parent and maybe even the kid to the table and say, listen, my dad and I have been at odds for years, and it has been hell on earth, and I don't want that for you. So can I share you with the mistakes that I made? Can I share you with what happened so that hopefully it wouldn't happen to you? Would you not allow the grace of Jesus to season that and to not bash your dad, not bash your parents, not bash that person, your uncle, or grandparent, or whoever else in your life? Allow the grace of Jesus to remind you you're just as messed up as they are, and then to share, hey, listen, this is how God's redeemed this. And maybe it's not reconciled yet, but this is how he's redeemed it in my heart. If you've wrestled with your faith, of asking, I don't even know if God's real. I don't know if this Jesus thing is legit. Or you've been hurt by the church, and the grace of Jesus has restored that. Would it not be beneficial for you to invite someone younger in their faith to the table and just say, hey, can I share with you my story? I'll give you the list of 5 people right now, 5 middle and high school students right now that you could do that with. Would it not be beneficial to invest in them that way? If you've raised kids, lost kids, know the pain of a prodigal son, someone who you invested in so much and they just went out and did their own thing and made their own decisions. And you're hurt by it, and the decisions they're making are causing them pain. Would it not be beneficial to bring young parents to the table and say, listen, here's what our story is. And I may not get on a stage and share it, but if it's beneficial to you, this is what Jesus is doing and how he's working in that story. Would you do that with me? If you've experienced and you walk through mental health struggles, depression, anxiety, worry, fear, would it not be beneficial to invite someone to the table and say, hey, can I just walk through my struggles? Can I just share them with you? If you've experienced physical pain, physical ailment, would it not be beneficial to invite someone to the table and say, in seasoned and filtered and shaped by the grace of Jesus, hey, if this helps you, I'd like to share with you the pain that I've walked through, and this is how I've coped. This is what I've done. So let's just be honest. Some of us walk through so many of these things alone, and you wish someone would have invited you to the table. Would you not allow the next generation to experience what you experienced about feeling alone? And no one should have to walk through those things alone. And here's the thing. If you're in this room and you're freaking out right now and you're getting anxious and you feel inadequate, then I would say you're ready. Because here's what I know. You are not responsible for knowing everything that there is to know. Let's just be honest. Nobody likes to know it all. You're not responsible for knowing everything there is to know. And in fact, you're not responsible for knowing more than everybody else. Because it's impossible. You never will. I never will. But I will tell you this. You are responsible for passing along what you do know to somebody else. Here's what I would say. And this is from a pastor who's much wiser than me. When it comes to the sum total of your life and what you've experienced and what Jesus has done in your life, you are not responsible for filling up someone else's cup, but you are responsible for emptying yours. All of it. Every pain, every joy, every struggle. You're not responsible for filling up that cup, but you are responsible for emptying yours. This is what Paul's trying to get Timothy to understand. Because, Timothy, if you get this, and then you invest in more, and then they invest in more, do you understand how this multiplies, how this grows? You have to ask yourself the question. With what you've been entrusted, what will you do with it? What will you do with it? There's a story that Jesus tells. It's a parable, and he talks about it's a parable of talents. So there's a very rich man that gave 3 different individuals. He gave a bag of 10 pieces of gold. The other he gave a bag of 5 pieces of gold, and the other one he gave a bag of 1 piece of gold. And at the end of the thing, he sent him out, and he said, now just go do with it what you will. The guy with 10 bags of gold invested it and doubled his investment. The guy with 5 bags of gold invested it and doubled his investment. The guy with 1 bag of gold buried it. And he came back to the ruler and he said, I knew how frugal you were, and I knew how harsh you were, so I didn't want to lose the money, so I just buried it. You know his response to him? What Jesus says his response to him is? You wicked and lazy servant. I'm for you, and I love you, so please hear me out. The reason why we choose not to invest in someone else is not because we don't have anything to share, and it's not because we don't have the time. For a lot of us, it's because we're lazy. And I've been there. Now, for some of us, there's real barriers. I mean, there's emotional, there's pain, and I get you're feeling that way, and I understand that. But I just need you to know, God has done that in your life for a reason. And it was to do something in you, but it was also to do something through you. But the problem is, if you just hold it inside of you, when you die, it's buried with you. And it doesn't pass along, and it doesn't go along. So I want to leave you with 2 thoughts, 2 encouragements, 2 challenges. We see this story, and what we see is, we see 2 kind of characters specifically. We see a Paul and we see a Timothy, and we see these other men that are coming along behind Timothy that Paul says invest in. So I've got 2 questions for you. The first one is this, because I believe we always need someone investing in us, and we always need to be investing in someone. It should happen simultaneously. So my first question is, who's your Paul? Who's your Paul? Who's older than you? Who's ahead of you in life? Who's more mature than you that you've invited into your life? Or maybe they've invited you into yours. That's awesome that they're investing in you. I can give you a list of 3 guys right now that are ahead of the game in me, and I can call them at any point, just ask them questions, and they call me and they check. I'm like, who are those people? Who have you invited into your life that are investing in you, that are saying the hard things, that are speaking truth, but also showing you grace? Who's your Paul? Let me say this too. Let me kind of relieve some of the tension in some people. There may be someone you go to, because no one's going to feel bad when you come to them and say, hey, I think you're awesome. Will you teach me how to be awesome? No one's going to feel like, oh, I'm so offended by that. Nobody. But this could happen. You could go to them and say, hey, I'd love to spend some time and learn from you. But they're already investing in a couple people. And they may say no. And it's not personal. It's just they understand. I'm called to love and serve everyone, but I can only invest in a few. And what happens so many times is we get demoralized and embarrassed, and we just walk away from it. Can I stop you there, and can I just put one more question in you? Because I guarantee you, if there's someone that you want to invest in them, they have a good answer to this. If they say no, lovingly, would you not just walk away, and would you actually ask, okay, thank you so much for your honesty. Could you point me in the direction of someone else that you feel like would be great to invest in me? Don't just give up. Keep asking, because it's that important. Second thing is this, who's your Timothy? Who are you inviting to the table? Who are you investing in? Who is that person or those kids or whoever else? I'll tell you an easy way to do this is to serve in City Kids, our elementary ministry. We need men and women that are willing to invest, that aren't babysitters, that aren't just showing up and then clocking in and clocking out, but that literally believe that the next generation is not the church of tomorrow, they're the church of today, and so we're going to invest in them like they are. We need men who are going to show other boys, this is what it looks like to worship Jesus. Hey, next week, heads up, we got a family Sunday. What that means is the elementary will be in here. Don't you dare skip because of that. You know why they're going to be in here? Not because we want to give City Kids volunteers a break. They deserve it because they're amazing. You know why they're going to be in here? Because we want kids to see adults worshiping. And we want adults to see kids worshiping. Would you serve in City Kids? I love this story. I leaked it last week. It just kind of flew out. Sometimes things just kind of are said. I didn't mean to. I meant to hold into it for this week. But 2 weeks ago was Mother's Day, and my son, who's 5, had a chance to sit in here with his mom on Mother's Day and also sit by his best friend. And so he was going to do that. And he began to walk out of City Kids, and Will Pash, who's an 8th grader, who's his small group leader, began to walk in. And he looked at he looked at my wife and said, Mom, I actually want to go in City Kids because I want to be with Will. I want to hang out with Will. I love that. But can I tell you something? It doesn't stop with Will, because Will's an 8th grader, and he's in our city student ministry. And so he has Donovan and Davis, who are his city group leaders that are investing in him. Investment to investment to investment. Paul, Timothy, faithful men. Who's your Timothy? I'll give you another easy one. In the summer, we're doing 2 basketball camps. We're partnering with Spalding County, and we're doing 2 basketball camps on Saturdays. You know the easiest way to invest in a kid's life? Just show up on a basketball court and be there, coach them. It's easy. That's a layup. See what I did there? A couple of you that follow basketball know what I did there. The rest of you, I lost you. All right, let's get back on track. I mean, it's easy. Who's your teammate? Who are you investing in? Who do you see as like, hey, if it's helpful, I will share this because God's entrusted it to me. Who are those people? Because if you don't invest what God has entrusted to you, when your life ends, the value of your life ends with you. Because the truth is, when I look back at my life, I don't want to see cars. I don't see homes. I don't want to see a bank account. I want to see people. Because the value of a life is always measured by how much of it was given away. If you're here and you don't know Jesus, I just want to tell you, this is the essence of the gospel. The reason why we can stand up here and proclaim these things is because we know the one who literally gave his entire life away on the cross for you and for me. The value of a life is determined by how much of it was given away. Jesus went to a cross and laid it all on the line for us so that we could have a relationship with God. And for you to begin, your starting point to figuring out how do I live a life that matters is finding and following the one who lived the ultimate life that gave it away for us, who defeated the cross and the grave and lives today. So it's easy for you. This first simple step is to give your life to Jesus, to trust him with your heart, to believe he died on the cross for your sins and he rose again. And you take that step, and that is when meaning begins. For those of us who are followers of Jesus, the value of our life is determined by how much of it was given away. God has given you way too much for you to waste it, so don't waste it. Let's pray. God, and I know there's a heaviness right now because you're calling us into something. So God, right now, I just pray that you would do what only you can do. And God, in that conviction, we're also experiencing your grace. And I just pray that we're being affirmed of our calling. And what you've given to us, God, we're ready to give it away. So God, would you be bringing people into our hearts and our minds? And would it not just be people and names in our heart and our mind, but would it be people that we take the step to invest in because you made the ultimate investment in us. In your name we pray. Amen.